Hello. We have finished up the Nolan reviews, as that was a delightful period of time that took way more than just November. But you know what? Christopher Nolan has earned that. But now we continue to move down the IMDb top 250. And what is next but a lovely trip into Middle Earth as we start off with The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. How the hell you doing? Mitchell Lee, Brandon 2, Tommy Grant here, and I can tell from both of you, but especially Tommy, that this has been a series of movies that has been a hotly anticipated one for the both of you.
I have enjoyed watching all the Christopher Nolan movies primarily for the first time, but this is a trilogy of movies that has a special place in my heart for a very long time. And they are definitely my favorite movies of all time. So I'm very stoked that we're covering these. When you made the announcement that this is what we were doing next, I was a little bit shocked because I did not think these were movies that you were going to be like eager to look into. So I'm happy we're here.
Nah, this man loves this trilogy. Maybe not as much as you do, but me and Mitchell have had conversations about this trilogy.
Well, it's for me. I know Mitchell as the Nolan fanatic, the Quentin Tarantino fan.
See,
this is a whole different ballpark and genre.
I was geared up for Tom Cruise. I thought we were doing Mission Impossible. I was setting my eyes on watching Tom Cruise run, but watching Frodo and Sam.
Now you're gonna watch
Hobbits mountains. Walk. Yeah, watching
now you're
Hobbits
gonna watch
walk.
Frodo Baggins fall over every time.
Yeah, watching Frodo fall over. That's my shit. I love this trilogy. I'm just gonna flat out say it, Mitchell. This is one of the best trilogies of all time. I'm just gonna start out the podcast saying it's one of the best trilogies in the history of cinema.
Tommy and Brandon have been talking a lot about the trilogy, but because these movies are so long, we are going to be doing one movie at a time. So it's going to be a little bit of a shorter review, but we will still have plenty to say. Now, before we get into the review, of course, I've got
right there because I have my first question of the night. Which version did you watch?
I think I know what you're about to ask.
Yeah, well, he just asked.
And here's what we're gonna lay out. First of all, Brandon, which version did you watch? Because I know what version Tommy watched.
Mitchell. I said on my review on Letterboxd, the only way to watch these movies now that you have access to it is to watch the extended version. The extended version is the only way to fully immerse yourself in this trilogy.
And that is the exact reason why I did not watch the extended version. Because I think that most people, when they watch these movies, they're going to watch the theatrical version. So I want to have that contrast of, because you know the difference between the two. I haven't seen these movies in quite some time, so I wouldn't know the difference between these two. And I wouldn't be able to provide any, sort of back and forth as far as that goes. We can have some back and forth on that now. But yeah, the extended version, or the non-extended version rather, is still 2 hours and 59 minutes long. So there's still plenty of movie for you.
As I say in my Letterboxd review, anyone can go see it in my Letterboxd, but the theatrical version is still a masterpiece. The extended version is like adding on to the buffet at the line, like you're just getting a little bit extra. A little bit of taste
and here's
of the
masterpiece.
Deal. And so that's why I would say watch the extended version. But
all right, you know what? Let me add this in, Mitchell. Before you say your nonsense. If Christopher Nolan came out with an extended version of Inception, and it was 1,000 times better than the original, would you tell people to watch the original or the extended version?
I would never watch an extended version of Inception.
Bullshit.
I'm dead serious.
Did you watch the Zack Snyder Justice League cut? Did you watch that?
I did, but that's because that was a completely different movie.
Okay, no, that's fair. It is a completely different movie.
That was marketed as a completely different movie. If it was just like, it pisses me off so much when like directors make I like the fact that you can still watch the theatrical version, or you can still watch the extended version.
All this
is like Star Wars, where you can only watch like the special editions That's the versions that are everywhere. You can't see like the original theatrical versions
like
unless you like find. Yeah, that's the stuff that
the
pisses me
6th
off. Make
movie.
both
Like you can't
versions
see the
accessible.
original Star Wars. Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Like you can't see the
Yeah,
originally
all this
released in
means
I like the fact
19
that
is
whatever.
now we are going to have a special episode after we do all these where you have to watch the extended and tell us if it's better or not.
And just tell us the difference between the two. Because
you know what I think that
I
is
was
fair.
joking when we were talking about the extended versions. I was like, oh, like they add like this and that. But if you actually like look at what they add, it's like 30 minutes, and I think it's pretty good context for like the trilogy itself. But in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like adding to the movie, I don't know if it adds like a whole lot. I'm with Tommy. It is like 1,000 times better because it adds to the trilogy. Is my whole argument for it. But I mean, we're
I will
mad,
say
but
this much.
we'll let it slide. It is what it is.
I will say this much. Before the end of the year, I will absolutely watch the extended versions and we
Okay,
will do a podcast about that. But I haven't
that's
seen
fine.
Fellowship of the Ring since 2014. So
2014.
I barely remembered
Boy,
any of
you
the
forced that
specifics about it.
in.
Mitchell,
My
you got
life
to
would be
watch these at least like once a year, twice a year. Once a year at
No,
least.
I saw Fellowship of the Ring once in 2014, Two
That's
Towers once in
crazy.
2015, and Return of the King once in 2020.
Hold on. Was that the first time you've seen them?
Yes.
Wow.
I've only seen
Yeah,
each of
that
them
is
once.
wow. That is
Okay.
But I
wow.
loved each of
I
them.
mean,
But
I've
let's
seen these
start off.
movies. I'm not like Tommy, but I've seen these movies at least 12 to 15
Now,
times.
all right. So I'm going to
I
take over
also
for a
didn't
second.
grow up with these
Brandon,
movies.
yeah. So Brandon, what was your experience like? Your
Watching the
intro,
extended version again.
just
Oh, just an
Lord of the
intro
Rings
to
trilogy.
Lord of the Rings. Well, I
Yeah.
watched. My dad likes these movies, so I watched it in like 2001, having no idea what Lord of the Rings was, and I was enthralled by it because I was like, "This is like peak fantasy. Like this is like the greatest thing ever." And
Yes.
then I would watch it like once every year or like once every 2 years. I would just like watch them over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's yeah. I mean, I'm flat out saying it. Like I'm not even gonna hide my feelings. Like it's one of the greatest trilogies ever made. And this movie in particular, we'll get into it. Maybe it's the weakest one in the entire series, but I think it sets up a lot inside of the trilogy.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really really awesome movie.
So I'm going
In
to
terms
bring
of
a
the
flash.
extended version, I only saw the extended version like 2 years ago with my brother. Me and my brother sat down and watched them. In the extended version, like I'll pair it again. It's fucking awesome.
So
So
I watched these movies for the first time in the great year of 2003.
okay,
And this was back in the magical land of South Brunswick and back in the time
Hey,
when
the
Blockbuster
magical land of
still
South
existed.
Coast.
And there's Mitchell, I'm sure you remember there was the Blockbuster on Route 1 in Monmouth Junction. That
the
was the place to
Blockbuster
go.
on the hill. Yep.
Yep. And
A
I
We were
beacon
was
of
selling.
light.
I don't know if you might have been
I
part of
Is
that.
I
this
was
like a
We were
Boston
selling
store?
Boy Scout like popcorn or
oh yeah.
whatever at that
A, a beacon
that
of light.
Blockbuster.
A
Yeah.
beacon of light on the
But
hill. The
this
blockbuster.
this was back in the time when
Yeah.
I was really sick for a good week. And it was one of those my mom was feeling bad and she's like, "Hey, let's go out to Blockbuster and pick out a couple movies for you to watch while you're homesick tomorrow."
Mm,
So of course, it was a great time. You
great
got to go to
call. Great
Blockbuster,
call.
peruse the aisles, and pick some movies out. I came across these and I was like, "These look pretty cool." And it had the PG-13 rating, and I was only like 8 at the time. And my mom had read The Hobbit, and she was like, "Oh, these are really cool. Like I'm liking these books. Let's watch them." So I was like, "All right, cool." So we got home, watched the first one, was hooked. I was like, "We're going right to the second one. I'm not waiting until tomorrow.
We're
We'll watch."
going to Two Towers.
And what do you know? It turns out that Return of the King was hitting the theaters a couple months later. So I was like, all right, let's go see the third one. And saw the third one in the theaters, and
And you old Tommy is just
I
like
was
having a
hooked.
day.
I was hooked for life, man. Like I
Yeah.
mean, I was prior to that, I was like a Star Wars fanatic. This turned me into Lord of the Rings fanatic, which turned me into a nerd, and then I eventually became a Marvel and DC fanatic, and it
Mm.
just went all uphill from there.
Yeah, I feel like me and you are on similar paths through the nerd timeline, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah, so feel you.
Well,
Feel you
I
on that.
was definitely I was definitely more on the Harry Potter timeline in the
Hey,
2000s.
Harry Potter's awesome.
The early
There's
2000s
no
was a
doubt.
great time
Yeah.
for movies.
Harry Potter's
In terms of
awesome.
franchises.
It really
You had
was. It was a
Star
good
Wars,
time
Harry
for
Potter,
very
Lord of the Rings, Marvel,
yeah
everything.
for this specific genre of these fantasy books being turned into movies. I mean, 2001 was a big year for that, as the highest grossing two movies of 2001 were Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and
Yeah.
then Fellowship of the Ring just behind it at number 2.
The sort of
Let's go ahead and
extended
dive into some of the
fantasy
background.
series. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Some of the background context of the first one. So, of course, this was directed by Peter Jackson, released December 19th of the year 2001 on a $93
The
million
year of our Lord.
budget. Which,
That was a massive.
I was going to say the good year of 2001, but I'm going to pass on that. $887 million at the box office. So this thing was
That's
a
insane.
big hit,
If you account
which is
for
good because they
inflation,
filmed.
right? Like if you count for
Yeah.
inflation, that's got to be like billions of dollars. That's
Yeah.
like, yeah. I mean, I don't know.
But they filmed
It's
them
crazy.
all like back to back to back.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah.
So
probably the smartest.
it was like, oh,
you could have possibly had.
Thank God that these were a success, because we already had the other two in the can. This wasn't a Kevin Costner Horizon situation where he's like, I've made 3 of these. What am I supposed to do now?
Yeah,
Nope, what you're
I'm
supposed to
filming
do
the
is
fourth
just,
one. It's like, oh no.
yeah. What you're supposed to do is release them because people really like them. This movie is number 9 all time on
this
the
movie in particular.
this movie in particular, number 9 on the IMDb
9.
Top 250, number 74 on the Letterboxd Top 250. It was nominated for 13 Academy Awards. It only won 4. So let's do some trivia.
It got snubbed. I know that.
What beat it out for Best Picture?
Ooh.
I'm guessing by what you said before, Harry Potter.
No. Harry Potter was not nominated for Best Picture.
I don't think Harry Potter was nominated.
Actually, I don't think did they win it?
No Harry Potter movies were nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah.
Which I think the last one should have
been.
I got no idea what else came out in 2000.
I'm just trying to think. Like Black Hawk Down was that year.
Ooh,
Pearl Harbor was that year.
Pearl Harbor's awful, so nope.
Yeah.
And extremely historically inaccurate, but that's a whole different
story. No, I mean that is a whole different story. That is.
Yeah.
Man, I really don't know. Moulin Rouge was that year, but that one won Best Picture.
Beautiful Mind
was nominated, but it didn't win.
Yeah, Beautiful Mind. Yeah,
Beautiful Mind was won Best Picture that year.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, that's a good movie.
Who beat? Because Ian McKellen was nominated for his role as Gandalf for Best Supporting Actor. Who beat him?
Who beat him out for Best Supporting Actor? Oof.
I will give you a hint. Just look at your screen.
Wasn't
John Bailey?
It was Jim Broadbent playing John Bailey in the movie Iris. Have I ever heard of the movie Iris? No. Have I ever seen the movie Iris? No. Have I ever heard anyone talk about the movie Iris? No. But you know what? I'm sure I'll watch it at some point. And
so supporting
at that point,
actor,
I'll have to come back and let you know.
Was this nominated for lead?
No.
Because I lost on who won lead actor that year. Wasn't that Denzel?
That was Denzel in Training Day, and that was a bit of a surprise because everyone thought Russell Crowe would go back to back. He won the previous year for Gladiator, thought he'd win for A Beautiful Mind. Denzel took it, and I think the world's a better place that Denzel has an Oscar for Training Day. Personally, this movie did win for Best Original Score, which I think was well deserved.
Yep.
This movie won for Best Cinematography, which I think was well deserved.
Yep.
Absolutely.
This movie won for Best Makeup, which I haven't seen Moulin Rouge. I bet there's a bunch of makeup in that, but I'm willing to
just based off of Gollum, it's 100%.
Well, Gollum's not really in this movie too much.
But makeup one.
Um,
For a hot sec, I would say more the hobbits because you have all
Oh
the
yeah, it's true. You do have to.
the ears and
yeah,
prosthetics with the elves and
Yeah,
stuff.
the prosthetics.
and the
No, it
orcs and that
definitely.
type of stuff.
Yeah.
Best visual effects was another one it won, and given its competition was Pearl Harbor and artificial intelligence. I think that was a
Not
pretty
much more fight.
yeah, pretty easy win for Lord of the Rings
Now,
Fellowship of the
Honestly,
Ring.
when you watch this, like it holds up. Like it does not look like it was made in 2001.
no, it doesn't.
I will not agree about that. I will say
Mm.
it's a movie that when I'm watching it, I'm aware that I'm watching something that was in the 2000s. However, I'm also thinking for something that was made in the 2000s, this looks really good and it looks a lot better than other movies that were being released at that time.
Mhm.
However, I can definitely tell that it's like, okay, I'm not watching, Dune or something that just came out recently.
Yeah.
Oh
But
sure.
I think the fact that they decided to shoot the large majority of this, or at least, what they really could, uh, in New Zealand with, actual environments as opposed to green screening the whole thing. I
So
think that definitely adds a lot to this movie, as
Yes,
well
it
as the
does.
entire trilogy.
I think the one thing Peter Jackson gets right is hiring Andrew Lesney as a
The one thing.
cinematographer. Yeah,
He only
well,
got
I
one thing
mean,
right making this
no,
whole
no, no,
trilogy.
no. He did a lot of things right, but I think if he doesn't hire Andrew Lesney as the cinematographer, I don't think it works. Um, Also, I just realized that Lesney beat out my goat cinematographer Roger Deakins that year as well.
Either
So
one of them would have done a terrific job.
yeah, well, yeah, that's a fair point. That Roger Deakins would have done a really good job with this, but I do think Lesney like adds a bit of a touch to it that is hard to find, and I mean the shots are just really unique and really interesting and really cool and very like sweeping, and then you get close-ups of like the hobbits and the orcs and the different characters, and you get characters running through the woods, and it's like the shots of that stuff is like pretty cool. So I don't know. I feel like the cinematography in this movie is top notch. Um, and I don't know if I totally agree with the fact that it doesn't like look. I mean, it doesn't like hold up. But for a movie made in 2001, this is like peak cinematography
It's
and
not
peak
something
visuals.
like 2001 was the same year that The Mummy Returns came out. Go
Yeah,
watch the
yeah,
special effects in that movie and compare it to the stuff going on here, and you'll be like,
yeah.
holy
It's
mother of
completely
God.
different, like
Yeah.
planets. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
This movie stars it's a big cast that only gets bigger as the movies go on. We've got Elijah Wood, Ian McKellen, Liv Tyler, Viggo Mortensen, Sean Astin, John Rhys Davies, Kate Blanchett, Billy Boyd, Dominic Monaghan,
you better
Christopher
say my
Lee,
boy's
Orlando
name.
Bloom,
Thank
Hugo
you.
Weaving, Sean Bean, Ian Holm, and very briefly, but more to come, of Andy Serkis.
I was like,
Let's
how
start.
long down the list was Orlando Bloom? I
So like
mean, that man
this
Orlando
was
Bloom
counts.
wasn't
definitely the
Orlando Bloom wasn't
breakout.
in as much of the movie
He
as I
wasn't.
think the big Orlando Bloom breakout
Is the
was
two
Two
towers?
Towers.
Yeah, two
I
towers.
mean,
Yeah.
we'll talk about Helm's Deep and all of that once we
Yes.
get to Two Towers. Um,
Yeah.
part part of the trouble with reviewing this movie is not reviewing it as far as
As a
like,
whole.
oh, but
Yeah.
The
Two
rest of
Towers
the
and Return of the
trilogy.
King, and
Yeah.
just because I've heard a lot of people, more people than you'd think, because Tommy, I saw your comment on my Letterboxd review where I said that anyone that thinks that this is the best movie, and I love this movie. This is a great movie. However, it's not going to get an A+ for me.
Mm.
Whereas I would be stunned if the next two didn't, especially Return of the King. But there's a lot of people that think that this is the best, or at least their favorite Lord of the Rings movie. And I said in my Letterboxd review not to let those people into your house. Because I think that if you think
Because
this is the
you have to be
best Lord of
extreme
the
as
Rings
you
movie, there's a problem. Um, but that being said, for the weaker one in the trilogy, as far as I'm concerned, this is not only a damn good starting point, but it definitely hooks you. So, uh, Tommy, where do you want to begin as far as just things to
So
talk about because
I
my
will.
mind immediately goes towards Ian McKellen.
So
Hmm.
I am going to do the cast alternatives for a quick minute before we even dive into
Oh,
the cast that's already existing, because this is a movie in my brain, one of those movies where I can't picture any of the roles being played by a different actor. It's very difficult for me to place.
If anyone touches Gandalf, that's
Yeah,
not Ian
like
McKellen. I
it's
would
just,
think it's crazy.
I don't know if it's just because of nostalgia for me, but it's just like it's a staple piece where it's like I can't
Yeah.
picture a remake or any other person playing these roles. Now, I'm going to give a couple special mentions of people that auditioned for roles, and then I'm going to go into a quick trivia of who do you guys think declined the roles if you guys don't know that already.
I do not know that.
So, in terms of the more minor roles, we had Lucy Lawless was actually offered the role of Galadriel. She turned it down because she was pregnant and didn't want to be in New Zealand for 3 years. Warwick Davis auditioned to be Gimli. Obviously, they went a much different route. James Corden auditioned and made it to callbacks for Samwise. I
Mm.
can't see him playing that role.
James Corden,
Uh huh.
like
Talk
the
show host, yeah.
the talk show
Yep.
comedian. Like, yeah, wow, interesting.
Jake Gyllenhaal auditioned for Frodo and apparently bombed the audition so badly that Peter Jackson told him that he was the worst actor he'd ever seen, which is pretty funny given, he at least has made some progress in his career since
Oh,
then.
Jake has like turned it
Jake's a
around. Okay,
great
I guess.
actor.
Yeah. I mean, maybe
He's
that was the
certainly done
motivation
more
he
than
needed.
Elijah Wood in the
That
Yeah.
was
last
the
15
motivation he
years.
needed. Yeah.
So he definitely made Peter Jackson eat his words on that one. But hey, everybody's got their rocky start. And
I
then
know
Liam,
why. I see that his agent directed him to have an American accent for the role, and so that might have tripped
possibly,
him
yeah.
up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough.
And then Liam Neeson was offered the role of Boromir, but conveniently enough, he didn't want to take the role because he didn't want to die in the first film,
Mm.
which is
Yeah,
kind
that
of funny
He
is.
because
just did that in Star Wars,
I
he
so
had
know.
just done that in
Yeah.
Star Wars, but conveniently enough, obviously Sean Bean took the role and has now become infamous for dying in like the first thing of everything because he died in the first season of Game of Thrones. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen that.
Oh
He
yeah.
died in the first movie of this.
Good job, Tommy.
Yeah.
Nice. It's been out for a while.
I
People need to go.
I could actually see that, that's one of
Liam
those that I
Neeson
can.
being Bromir. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one I can see.
Yeah. Now, in terms of Aragorn and Gandalf, probably had the biggest list of big name actors for the role. There are 3 actors that Peter Jackson wanted to be in the role of Aragorn, and 3 that he wanted in the role of Gandalf. Can you take any guesses of who they were?
I'm gonna go
Well, I'm
with.
looking at the Wikipedia
Oh,
page right
you
now,
are.
so I'm not
Ah,
the
you
one to.
bitch.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Aragorn. I'm gonna say he wanted Brad Pitt,
Nope.
possibly. I don't know. That's weird. Because Gandalf, I can't. Gandalf, the only other person I can think of is like Dumbledore's actor
Mm,
might have played Gandalf, but
okay.
I don't
Mitchell,
know.
did you look at these
Yeah,
already?
that's weird.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, and the Aragorn ones, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. The Gandalf ones are like, what the fuck am I looking at?
Yeah. So,
So it's like we're glad it's Ian McKellen, basically.
yes.
Like,
So,
yeah.
for
Yeah.
Aragorn, like the top 3 names I had found were Russell Crowe, Nick
Okay,
Cage,
that makes
and
sense.
Daniel Day Lewis,
Nick Cage and Daniel Day. Okay,
which I
Nick Cage would have been
would have
a
been
choice.
interesting.
Nick Cage,
Russell
I can't.
Crowe,
No.
Russell Crowe or Daniel Day Lewis would have done a great job.
Yep. Apparently, Russell Crowe turned it down because it was too similar to Gladiator. I'm not quite sure how. I guess just because the
He
source.
didn't want to be in the same. He didn't want to be pigeonholed. I don't understand that.
I don't know.
Like Russell Crowe is an awesome actor. He would have.
So at least you have the big name actors, and then you go to Gandalf. The first one I can kind of see just because of the accent and his history with action. That was Sean Connery.
Mm,
He was apparently Peter Jackson's first choice for the role.
okay.
He turned it down because he didn't understand the concept, had never read the novels. So he obviously was not a nerd like us and was like, holy shit, this is like the role of a lifetime. He turned it down. which I'm happy he did because I can't picture Sean Connery in Lord of the Rings whatsoever.
Sean Connery.
No.
Granted, conversations with him and Christopher Lee probably been more comical to listen to, but yeah, Ian McKellen killed the role. The other two, one being Patrick Stewart, who declined the role. I'm iffy on that one. And David Bowie.
Could have worked, but I just what?
David Bowie is like a wild one.
Yeah,
But
David Bowie.
I
I
feel
know.
like David Bowie has been good in like most things he's been casted in,
Yeah,
other than like terrible movies that he just like couldn't save. You know what I mean? So
He's good in the Prestige.
yeah, it would be interesting to see David Bowie in this movie for sure.
So yeah, so he had some odd choices, and even for Aragorn, Viggo Mortensen wasn't the original choice. Stuart Townsend was actually casted and started production, but apparently was fired within the first couple days of filming. And
Good for Vigo.
Oh,
They kind of scrambled after that and landed on Vigo. So
Interesting.
yeah, so Vigo got super famous off of luck, I guess, on that end. But I think in terms of
and great
best,
performance.
fantastic performance. I think the best cast was Christopher Lee as Saruman, because
Yeah,
Christopher
that's a good
Lee
cast.
brought not just his acting skills, but just his knowledge of Tolkien. Because obviously, a lot of people that are like diehard fans know, like Christopher Lee is one of the only cast members that has actually known J.R.R. Tolkien, has met him in person. He read the books every single year. So he was just this diehard Lord of the Rings fan. So he was actually almost a consultant for Peter Jackson throughout the film of the trilogy. He was always kind of making corrections of like, no, it probably wouldn't have been this way, been this way. So I think Christopher Lee holds the staple for best acting for me in at least this movie.
All right, so
Yeah.
the movie's about. Once we finally get to that,
It's about a
uh,
ring.
yeah, it's
It's
about
about a
it's
ring.
about Frodo Baggins. It's about Frodo Baggins, and he's a hobbit living in the Shire. And he finds out that his dad Bilbo has
Uncle,
this
you stupid
ring.
Uncle, you
Sorry,
heathen.
He calls him Uncle
yeah,
Bilbo in the film. Come on,
as
man.
his fairy godmother Bilbo Baggins has this ring for him, and they find out that yeah, uh Bilbo, buddy, you really shouldn't have that. We're gonna take that from you. It's corrupting you, and we're gonna give it to Frodo and figure out what the hell to do with this, because now that you've used it, people are coming for you. I feel like I'm not the best one to explain this. So
Yeah.
Tommy, I will hand this one off
There's
to
so
you.
many things wrong.
So Tommy, yeah. I mean, there was, but Tommy and I were talking about this after our podcast yesterday. Just like the lore behind it, and like I do think Peter Jackson kind of starts in like a weird spot, and he kind of just like starts in the middle of a story.
I kind of liked that
You
though.
don't really get the full context of like why Bilbo has the ring, like what's going on, like why does Gandalf know he has the ring, whereas like that's not explained in the movie. And I do like that. I do like that type of vibe, but there's a lot that's missed from the novel that maybe Tommy could speak on.
They
Yeah,
do a good job of making you feel a shared history between these
yes.
characters before you ever really get to spend any time with
Right,
them.
exactly. Yep, exactly.
And I liked that. And as someone that I've seen, and just to let people know, we will also be reviewing the Hobbit movies after this. I know they aren't as highly thought of as the Lord of the Rings movies, granted what is, but that's kind of something that they refer to, especially at the beginning of this movie, is they refer to things that happened in the Hobbit book and that would happen in the Hobbit movies.
Yep.
Quite a bit at the beginning of this movie. And so if you are just someone who just stumbled into Lord of the Rings, hey, this is Spider-Man, and you're in the wrong theater, you might be a little bit confused at first. But I promise you, as someone that did not keep up with it that much the first time that he saw this movie, um, just roll with it, and eventually it feels like it takes a little bit for the plot to get to where it needs to go, but I liked having that time with the characters, and I
Yes.
liked being in this world and kind of getting the feel of everything because you feel what's at stake. You feel the kinship between the hobbits, especially Frodo and Samwise Gamgee. Um, and you really come to like Gandalf as well. But Gandalf can be this friendly guy, but can also, he knows when it's time to get serious.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
He's someone who's always kind of 10 steps ahead, and he has his own purposes when he's doing things. No one else just realizes, like, hey, like, he's really manipulating us to get, to get us where he needs us to
The
be.
biggest manipulator.
But yeah, I think Peter Jackson did a great job with the intro because originally the studio wanted only a 2-minute introduction scene. He ended up pushing for 7, and you get that whole opening sequence, which Kate Blanchett narrates, and it kind of gives you like that whole snapshot of like thousands of years of information piled into 7 minutes, and then all of a sudden it's like, bam, you're in the Shire, peaceful, calm music playing. It's like you just
The strings in the
like
background.
yeah, and again,
Yeah.
like this is where Howard Shore just really shines. I think the Hobbit score, like all like the Shire scenes, like it's just so
Yeah.
relaxing. Like you could
All
just
those string like elements is just
like
it's
that's
some of
part of
the
that
best
relaxing
music in
soundtrack. Like when I'm
a
like super
movie. Yeah.
stressed, I need something just like to mellow out. Just put on a couple,
I'm with you.
songs from Lord of the Rings from the Shire scenes, and it's just like it just relaxes you.
Yeah, I think it's some of the best music in all of cinema. And I wouldn't really like think that, but like when you're watching it and like you just get the vibe of the Shire
Yep.
and like what you're going after. Um I'll put it this way, Mitchell. I totally understand if people don't like this movie or they just like don't like Lord of the Rings. I personally am not one of those people, but I'll say this: it has you have to buy in to the first 10 minutes of lore of the entire like 7 minute opening scene, and then you have to buy into the 15 to 20 minutes you have with Gandalf and Bilbo. If you don't buy into that, you're not gonna like this movie. Like you might as well just like let it go, roll with it, like see what happens. But if you don't buy those first 35 minutes and you don't like what's going on there, I don't think it's gonna vibe for people in the right way in terms of like setting up the rest of the movie. Because I'm with you, Mitchell. It does take like 45 minutes to get it
It's not a
going
slow
into
burn, but it's also getting to know the characters.
Yep.
A bit of the hijinks thrown in there with Merry and Pippin. And one of
The dragon, yeah, the
well,
dragon
I was gonna
fireworks.
say one of my favorite scenes was that the dragon fireworks scene. And when I was doing some research, I actually found out that Billy Boyd, who plays Pippin, didn't realize the firework was going to go off. So when it goes off and you hear him scream in the movie, like that was his live reaction because he didn't know the firework was going to launch. And apparently afterwards, like he had pissed himself during that scene. So like Mary, Dominic Monaghan would call him piss pants for like the rest of the shooting because he pissed himself because of the firework.
That's such a Merry and Pippin thing, though.
I was like, yeah, it's like so now every time I see that scene, I can't help but think
Piss
of that.
pants.
It's like you guys
Good
mentioned.
job, piss
You
pants.
you have to be willing to just like let yourself be engrossed in the world before quote unquote things start happening because things do happen. It's letting you know, hey, this is what needs to happen. This is what's at stake. How the hell are we ever going to do this? And then you meet characters along the way.
Mm.
I forgot just how far into the movie it is before the quote unquote fellowship is established. I mean, that's
Yeah,
like a
before the
little over
council and
halfway
Elderon. Yeah.
through, if I'm not mistaken. Now, a movie that I couldn't help but compare this to a lot, and Brandon, you might be like, no, that's a terrible comparison. Don't do that. But I just couldn't help but compare this movie to Dune Part One a lot.
Mm.
Um,
And it comes
I
back
I
to Boone.
I just always found myself
I
comparing.
see where you're going with it. So go ahead and explain yourself.
I kept comparing it to Dune Part One, and in that movie, it for me at least, it felt like it had a little bit of a quicker pace than this did. then again, I think that the Two Towers kind of has a little bit more of a similar pace to the first part of Dune, and this one is much slower. Now, I'm also
I'll say
comparing it
this.
to, as much as I love Return of the King, I'm not sure it's going to quite reach Dune Part 2 level, but it could. And to
Yeah.
even say that it could is a remarkable achievement.
So I'll say this, Mitchell, as someone who's read both Lord of the Rings and Dune and read two books in the Dune series and all of Lord of the Rings, I think this is a way more faithful adaptation of Lord of the Rings than Denis Villeneuve's adaptation of Dune is. And this isn't to
Yeah.
take a shot at Denis, but
No, I agree with you. I mean, from things that I've heard,
yeah,
because Denis Villeneuve also
he has to cut
seemed
stuff
like,
because Dune is
but it,
so
but it
much.
also seemed like he definitely wanted it to be an adaptation of the book, but he was willing to take artistic license,
Mhm,
whereas
mhm.
Peter Jackson almost made it a priority to, we're going to
Adapt the
make
book.
this, we're going to adapt this source material, and whatever problems that may cause, we're going to work around those and find solutions to them, but we're going to adapt this. We're not really going to make any I'm sure that someone's like, oh, you're full of shit, man, but for the most part,
Because
Peter Jackson definitely wanted to stay loyal to the source material and not deviate from that too much.
if Denis was to adapt Dune fully as like the first movie, that just would have like the pacing of that would have been insanely slow because the pacing of the first book of Dune is insanely slow.
I
It's
think it would
worse
have
than
been
Lord of
too.
the
I mean,
Rings.
I mean,
It's worse.
imagine trying to make part one and part two into one whole movie. That would have been 2.5 hours of way too much stuff.
Right, right.
Um,
So I think Denis did the right thing. But I do think Peter Jackson, like, yes, he cuts out some stuff, Tommy. Obviously, he does. But I think in terms of faithfully adapting the book, I think he does a really good job of like
Yeah.
adding a lot of stuff in there. And I also think that's what the extended version is for. I
Yeah.
think those 30 extra minutes are him sprinkling some more adaptation
And
from the
it's
book.
crazy how much stuff he still actually cut out of the book that was fairly important, but
Yeah, because the
still
book's long. I'm not going to
but
act
the
like the
movie
book
didn't
isn't
feel like he cut stuff out. Like, it was very
right.
well done.
Whereas, like I would say with Dune part with the first Dune, it feels like he cut some stuff out. Whereas, like in this movie, in the Fellowship of the Ring, it doesn't feel like he cuts things out of the first book, even though he does. Like we know he does, but it doesn't feel like that. Um, so yeah, I'm with you though, Mitchell. The pacing I think is weird in this movie, but I'll give the pacing a pass because I think the pacing of just the Fellowship of the Ring sets up the rest of the trilogy. If
for
you're
a
not
3 hour
willing,
movie, it moves pretty
yeah,
quickly.
it does move quickly for a 3 hour movie, but I can see where people are like, wow, this pacing is like tough and 3 hours is a lot. Um, I had to break it up into 2 days. I mean, I'll be honest with that. But Tommy, I'll actually say to you, after we got off the podcast last night, I watched the majority of it again because I
Nice.
just couldn't get enough. So I was like,
It's
instead of watching
it's
Two
that
Towers,
damn good.
yeah,
I'm
instead of
excited.
watching Two Towers, I'm gonna go back and watch Fellowship before we watch Two
Oh,
Towers again.
that makes me so proud.
Um, yeah,
Do you guys have a favorite for this movie? Because mine,
like a
again,
favorite character.
Like, favorite
like
scene, favorite character. What are we talking about
Yeah.
here?
I've got to go. Let's go with character to start, and then
Okay.
we'll go with scene.
Okay.
Because my favorite character's got to be. I think Ian McKellen just kills it as Gandalf in this movie. I think as we go further along, and then I mean, this is a spoiler review, so I mean, if you haven't seen
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings by now, what the hell are you doing?
Cut
Um,
out and drop
yeah,
out. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that scene, I would say at the end, but it's not really at the end of the movie, where I'm so bad with remembering the names of places and
You talking about the
things in
mines of
this.
Moria?
Yeah, that scene with the Balrog, that was a fantastic. That's what you remember, or at least that's what I remember from this movie.
The infamous
The
line,
the, the
"You shall not
score,
pass."
yeah, the you shall not pass, and then he dies, and everyone's reaction to it, the score is incredible at that moment. And I will say this, because again, I did not give this movie an A+, but, and I know that this is based on books and all that, if this movie had cut off right after the look on Frodo's face after Gandalf dies, and they make it out, and they're on the mountain, and then they're like, "Come on, we gotta go," and then it just cuts to Elijah Wood's face as they're looking for Frodo, and he just looks really sad. If the movie had cut off there, this would have been a significant A+ for me, because that would have been a holy shit. Two Towers is gonna go off. What the hell are they gonna do now?
Yeah, Two Towers would be like 5 hours long.
But you're almost advocating.
That's fine by me. I'm okay with that.
You're
coming from the man who doesn't want to watch the extended edition because it's too long.
Well, what you're
I don't want to watch
for,
it because it's too long. It's because it's not the theatrical version because I'm a snob. That's
what you're advocating for is 6 movies. Is what you're advocating for. You're
advocating for
into 6 movies.
What I'm advocating for will be clear in the Two Towers.
Okay.
Because I think there's things in the Two Towers that you can cut, and you can include the things that happen with Boromir at the end of Fellowship of the Ring, and make that the beginning of the Two Towers as like and we're off to the races type of thing.
Yeah.
So
granted, am I saying that I can make these movies better than Peter Jackson? Of course I am, because I'm a doofus that says weird, outlandish things. But I'm saying that if this had ended at that point, this would be an A+ 51.2%. Like, I would have been I would have been like, ooh, that's a great ending point. I'm filled, like, I got goosebumps. And there's a lot of that where it's just like, I feel like the movie kind of peaked in that moment, and then continuing on just kind of felt
I can get behind that take. I'm not saying that it didn't peak at that moment, but I think the rest of the movie, and we'll get to, I can go ahead and share my favorite scene, because my favorite
scene
is
favorite scene, favorite character.
So my favorite character, I don't think this should be a shock. I think the MVP of the entire trilogy is Viggo Mortensen. I think it's Aragorn. Like, I think he's the MVP.
Overall,
I think he's the MVP of this movie. Like, I think him and Ian McKellen. I think him and Ian McKellen are like right there with each other. And if you're gonna give it to Gandalf, then I'll mention Aragorn, because I think Aragorn is a total monster in this movie. Like, the way he uses his facial expressions, the way he talks to characters, the way he like scolds Boromir and is like, give him the ring back. Like, all of that stuff is just like A+ work by Viggo. One of my favorite scenes is when they're rowing on the river, and the Uruk-hai are like chasing them through the woods. The way the pace picks up, the music, the tempo, the sounds, that's like A+ cinematography, A+ score work, and it's some of the best like filmmaking out there. That's one of my favorite scenes, is when you see the Uruk-hai in Mordor, and then you just see them racing across the woods, like chasing them basically, and you can just feel the tension, and it's just building and it's building and it's building, and then like we get to the final scene, and like, or like one of the final scenes, and like the death of Boromir, like that's like A+ filmmaking to me. I think it's incredible work, and I think it redeems the arc of Boromir's character, because I think he finally realizes, like, I wasn't strong enough to handle the power of the ring, but at least I did enough to try to save Merry and Pippin. And like, I couldn't do it, but like, you can just feel the pain in his voice. Like, they took the little ones, like, I failed you, and Aragorn's like, it's okay, like, you did what you could, like, it's not your fault. But
and I will make sure that like we do what needs to be done.
Right. He almost like promises him, like, I'll make sure the ring gets where it's gonna go. But then Viggo,
I'll win Super Bowl while you're on IR, man.
yeah. but then I do think Vigo's like handling and like Aragorn's handling of like Orlando Bloom's like, look, they just made it across the river. Like we gotta go chase them, and you can just like see his face. He's like, Frodo's not our problem now. Like let's go save Merry and Pippin. Like that to me is like one of the best ends of the movie. I know it ends with Frodo and Sam, and I do think that's awesome. And I do think that shot at the end where they're, crossing over over the mountains and they're walking, and I think that's an awesome end shot. But I think when Aragorn's character is like travel light because it's time to go hunt some fucking orcs. Like that is like I got almost jumped off my
Yep.
like couch. I was like, yeah, let's go.
Can I
fucking
ask a
hunt some
question
orcs
to
right
the
now.
real Lord of the Rings heads here?
Yes.
Okay.
Why? That seems stupid to me.
What,
Let's
hunting
go get
orcs?
Merry and Pippin and leave Frodo alone.
So
Why?
this was
It
something
feels
that
like
was
that's the
left out.
priority, right?
Well, this was something that was left out of the books. Or left out of
Or
the movie.
left out of the movie from the books. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a whole chapter where basically they had a whole debate over what path they were going to take. And Frodo had mentioned the whole aspect of him going it alone because of the fact that the ring was going to only become stronger in its corruption, and they would not be able to handle the corruption, obviously, as we saw at Boromir. So he was saying he wanted to go alone because it was his task, and he didn't want to, have them betray him or something bad happen to them along the way.
And Gandalf hints at that in the movie is like someone's going
Yeah.
to be corrupted in your party.
And Aragorn was in support of that and basically, was like, hey, like, we'll honor whatever you decide to do, which is why when you have that scene with Frodo and Aragorn, Frodo's like, don't tell Sam, he won't understand. That was kind of a nod to what was going on in the books because Sam was very like, no, we're going wherever you go because that's what we promised Gandalf. So that was something that was in the books that they kind of left out. So that's why at the end, Aragorn's like, no, like, we're honoring his decision. We got to go save Merry and Pippin because they're in
Gotcha.
trouble.
Okay. I remember that now. No, that makes sense. It's just one of those things that
Yeah.
when I think about it just on its own, where they're like, oh, we're going to get Merry and Pippin, I'm like, why?
It's almost like an acknowledgement of like the ring is too powerful. And it's kind of crazy to think about a hobbit being like able to withstand the corruption.
It's also because Aragorn knew that his true path was to go to Gondor and eventually become king, and he was not going to be able to do that while traveling.
Which I'll say this, Mitchell, is explained in one scene in the extended edition where they are like, you're the ancestors of so and so. You need to become the king of Gondor in order to free them from basically have the return of the king. It's explained in an extended scene in the movie, in the extended version.
I was hoping that you guys would go over what the extended version adds.
Nope, we are not doing that because you got to fucking watch that shit.
I mean, it's like a 2-minute scene. What I just mentioned, it's like a conversation between two characters.
Yeah,
where it's like you're
not
the
going to
king.
spoil anything for me. I've seen the movies.
That'll be another time, Mitchell. Another time.
Okay, fair enough. But it just adds an extra layer. So I think that's why Aragorn's like, yeah, my destiny is not to shepherd Frodo to Mordor. It's to return as the king, which I guess, spoiler alert, might happen.
Might happen.
We'll see as we keep going. Yeah, you never know.
Tommy, favorite?
My favorite character is Aragorn, but my second favorite was Merry.
Okay.
Merry was that. Merry is like that crazy friend who's just like, who has no idea what's going on, but he's like, hey, this sounds like fun. I'm tagging along because I've got nothing else better to do.
So you liked Jar Jar Binks a lot.
My favorite is my favorite scene is when he's like, I will also go in the fellowship, and then he's like, so what are we doing?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well,
it was like the comedic relief for the movie, but
you're sacrificing your life. Like
at the same time, like he was like that loyal best friend to Frodo. It's like that whole scene, towards the end, where they're all hiding in the bushes from the Uruk-hai, and Mary's like, oh, he's leaving. We got you. And it's just like, hey, let's go distract all these Urukai so you can escape. That was a pretty badass move because like he basically knew he was going to die in that scene, but obviously Boromir King saved him. But Mary was my second favorite of this movie.
Or like, how much of that bread did you eat? Oh, I ate 3 or 4 of them. And
Yeah.
Orlando Blues like, one bite will satiate the appetite of an elf or a human. He ate like 4 of them. I was like,
Was that an extended scene?
these hobbits are. Yeah, I think that's an extended scene.
Yeah,
The
because
hobbits are
Mitch was
so. The
basically like,
hobbits are so fucking hungry, dude. They're so hungry. Like, I mean, it gets talked about more in the trilogy, but they're so hungry. It's hilarious.
Yeah, there's a scene early in the movie where Bilbo's just looking for all this like food to eat because
Yeah, he's
Gandalf's
talking to
over.
Gandalf. He's like, I have this
It's
and
like
this and that.
he's like, oh, I have a sponge cake lying around here. I'm like, what the fuck do you mean lying around here?
You just
What?
have a sponge cake
because
lying around.
hobbits love to eat, man. Hobbits have like 18 meals a day. That was another great
Second
line. It's like,
breakfast,
oh, we've had one
third
breakfast.
breakfast.
Yes, but what about second breakfast?
Yeah, what about second
So
breakfast?
my fiance actually wants to one of these days watch the Lord of the Rings movies
Have a
and
meal.
have
Yes.
have
My
Like
favorite.
have
first
but like
breakfast, second
but
breakfast.
not like first breakfast is like from Bojangles or something, but like have like actual like
No, you got to home make that shit.
A
Hobbit
hobbit's
food.
meal. Yeah, like a hobbit's meal.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that
And
is
I'm
an
like, that
Beans and
sounds like a
sausage.
lot of cooking.
Yeah, beans and
if you have
sausage.
a
Yeah.
full day's like you have nothing to do that day, football season's done, and you just want to kill a day, do a full
Yeah.
trilogy and just plan out and just have meals throughout the day and just eat food and just watch Lord of the Rings all day. It's a magical experience.
Hmm.
That does sound nice.
It is.
Before we give our grades, one final trivia question.
Ooh.
One
I love
final one
trivia.
that should have included earlier. First of all, whoa, that's surprising. I know this has nothing to do with the damn Lord of the Rings, but the NFL MVP went to Josh Allen. So
Yikes.
that's congratulations, Tommy. What movie dethroned the Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring? Because it was number one for 4 weeks at the North American box office. What movie dethroned it?
It wasn't
Brandon is
Harry Potter. It
cheating
wasn't Harry
right
Potter,
now.
right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
No, Harry Potter came out like a month and a half before Lord of the Rings,
Okay.
so no.
I mean, it couldn't have been Black Hawk Down because
It was Black
it
Hawk Down.
was.
Congratulations
Oh.
on being wrong.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Black Hawk
Uh,
Down in January of 2002, a movie
that's terrible.
I have never seen, but I need to
Wait,
check
you
that out.
said it
All
did
right.
dethrone? There was Black Hawk Down?
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
because my
That was
next
the movie
guess
that
would have been Hannibal, even though that is not as good a movie as it should be.
as Black Hawk Down, although strangely enough, directed by the same person. Ridley Scott made both of those movies that came out within a month of each other.
That's
So,
crazy.
very
Good for
strange.
him.
But rather, Hannibal came out in 2001. So forget all the things that I just said about Hannibal. All right, I'm gonna start off with the grade because I know I'm gonna be the lowest, and so
Okay.
uh, I just want to get this out of the way and let these two get their parties underway. I gave this an A, 77.91%. So still
Slow.
pretty high. But I will say that on Letterboxd, I keep a list for the years of movies that I watch. I have 70s, 80s, and then every year from 1990 on. And in 2001, I do have this behind Memento. I did like Memento more than Fellowship of the Ring personally. And I had this around where I had Poor Things and Reservoir Dogs. So very similar grades to those two movies, Brandon.
Fair enough. I do think Reservoir Dogs is very good, and so is Memento. This movie will not be near those movies in my grade. This movie will actually be right behind Inglorious Bastards. And that's because, as Mitchell likes to say, I love to hand out these grades. This will be an A plus 85.3 for me.
Fuck yeah.
This probably ends up being a top 30 film for me, which, yeah. And it might be my lowest grade of Lord of the Rings movies, if I'm being honest. We'll see where Two Towers and Return of the King end up. But yeah,
I already
that's
know
where I
what
have
they're
it.
being ranked in my head because I've already watched them last week, but I'm gonna watch them again just for the
Just for the
storyline.
posterity of it.
But
Yeah.
yeah, mine I'm giving it an A plus 95%. These are gonna be the highest graded
I
movies
mean,
I
that's
have.
movie Hall of Fame. Like what? Like these.
That's
I
that's
told you
higher than I have
these are my
Dune.
movies. Like this is like if you had to bring a movie on a deserted island type kind of thing, this would be the movies I would bring.
Yeah, that's
All
higher than I
right.
have Dune Part Two. Yeah, I mean that's.
Yeah. That's higher than I have all but 3 of the movies that I've ranked and reviewed. Those 3 being Inception, Dark Knight, and Shawshank.
Shawshank.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's fair.
So, hey, it's number 9 on the IMDb top 250, so you know that there are people out there, including you two, that love this thing. But the good news about this is that there's more to come. And that The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers came out the next year. And we're going to be talking about that on the next podcast. You don't have to wait 1 year for it the way that you did in 2001 and 2002. You just have to wait 1 week. So come back next week and we will review the 2002 fantasy classic, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers.